Yesterday we ended off with the Chiddush of the Biur Halacha. Right? Chiddush of the Biur Halacha. We learned the Biur Halacha in Siman Samach Beis, where he brings a raya. The Chofetz Chaim lays down the following halacha. There's a Mishnah which says that there are a number of things which are nemorim b'chol loshen, and one of them is Krishma. The shaila of the Biur Halacha, just to quickly recap, the shaila that he spoke about was, what is the definition of when you say something is nemorim b'chol loshen? If people have to understand it, do they have to understand it in the locale where they are to be found, or is it something as long as it is a recognized language? Says the Chofetz Chaim. Let's run through it again, please. It won't take us long. Let's run through it again, and then we'll continue. V'da oid. So it's the Biur Halacha, yes, from yesterday. V'da oid. Denirli b'pshitus. The oisan dvarim anemorim b'choloshin davke im anshe oisay hamadina medabrim kach. The things that are nema b'choloshin is only valid if the people in that locale speak that language. Aval im anshe hamadina enim yicholim medaber zeh loshin, and it's only for certain yechidim. Lo nechshav klal lemedina zu. It's not considered a loshen in this Medina where people, generally speaking, do not recognize this language. Bishlei loshen hakodesh, which is not a social convention; it's the language of essence. We have a different approach to loshen hakodesh for various reasons. But the minute you start talking about the notion of language is a social convention. It's the ability to communicate, and that is therefore that is the concept of loshen. And therefore, if you're going to use a loshen in a place where other people, generally speaking, would not be assumed to understand it, it does not have the din of loshen. Now here it gets really interesting. Says the Mishnah Berurah, says the Biur Halacha, v'raya l'dvarai, he brings a raya from our Gemara. Gemara in Kiddushin, which says, Hariat charufosi b'Yehuda mukudeshes. If two people say Hariat charufosi, in Yehuda, it's Mekudeshes, because in Yehuda, they call Arusa Charufa. But if you were to say the same thing anywhere else, they would not be Mekudesh. He says the Chofetz Chaim, Afshe Shneim Kivnu L'Shem Kiddushin, V'Kiddushin Hu B'chol Loshen. We know Kiddushin can be said in any language. And both of them understood what's going on. So just to dismiss it and to say this is she's not an Eishes Ish, is a big chiddush. How can the Gemara definitively say that if you say Hariat Charufasi anywhere outside of Yehuda, it's no good? Afal pi kain, kiven de ein loshen zeh loshen kiddushin ba'oisoy makoim. Given that in that place we're outside of Yehuda and we use a language that only means kiddushin in Yehuda, therefore have a keilu nosan kesef v'lo yamaklal. It is as if he just gave her money and there is nothing has been said here at all. De'eina mekudeshes. She's not mekudesh, giving money without saying anything. In other words, the Chofetz Chaim very clearly understands that there is a din loshoin b'kiddushin. We're going to come to that shortly, and that we need to understand is a chiddush. Now he brings two rishonim. He brings a rosh and a ritva. V'chein kosav a rosh v'shulchan aruch. Our shulchan aruch. De'beina sheyema loshin kiddushin sheba'isay makom. He goes on, on the rif in the Dorim, that says, the bechol loshoin hainu haloshin shemedabrim ba'oisay mokim ulefi zeh teida l'nochai. Therefore, be aware. The mashakos having the Mishnah Berurah tzarich gam ken sheyovim b'zeh haloshin hainu de'enim moil mashan she'amedina medabrim b'zeh haloshin. You need to know that it's both things. You need to understand it. It's not enough that other people understand it as well. It cuts both ways. This is the Mishnah Berurah. Now, this Mishnah Berurah, this Biur Halacha, is difficult for a whole bunch of reasons. One of the reasons is that there are things in Halacha where we are told you have to. There's a din of Amira, Bituis Vasayim, Shma. You can't just sit and think Shma. There's a din Loshen. And therefore we need to deal with the sugya of what is considered loshen. Nedarim, Parsha Sota, which is the Mishnah's in Sota. You have to say Parshas Sota, right? It has to be read. So you can say it can be Nikra b'chol Loshen, but there is a din of reading it. There's a din of Loshen. By Kiddushin, as a number of you asked, there would appear not to be a fundamental requirement for Loshen at all. Haraya, Asukim ba'isayinyan. They're busy Asukim ba'isayinyan, and he gives it to Bishtika Mekudeshes. So, Rabbi Yashiv answers this question in the following way, and he says that the Asukim ba'isayinyan is the Dibur. Maybe it could be, and there are Achroinim that hold the Teras Gittin, the Hamakin, and others that actually, interestingly enough, hold there is a concept, there is a din of Loshen b'Kiddushin, but the Asukim ba'isa Inyan counts towards, that is considered the Loshen of Kiddushin. Fine, that's one approach. Okay.
Rav, is halachically Lashon also Lashon must be with words? It can't be like gestures and stuff, or can it?
Well, if there's a din of Amir, if there's a din of Loshain, then Loshain has to be, and that's why we're going to come to Yodayim, which I started mentioning already, right? Sif Dalad here is if you say Hariyat, it's a Gemara, Hariyat Mekudeshes, but you don't say Li. And one of the rayas, I forget who it is, we're probably going to see it shortly, is the Gemara compares Nadorim to Kiddushin in the sugya of Yodayim. Yodayim is there are different types of Yodayim. Yodayim is an unclear language. Hariyat Mekudeshes. So like a Yad, yesh Yad l'Kiddushin or ein Yad l'Kiddushin, the Gemara has a Shaila. Yad, as we saw yesterday, I mentioned the definition, Yad is when, it's not the keli itself. Why does a pot have a handle? Because it's just a way of getting to it, it's a way of literally of holding it. It's a Yad. But it's not in and of itself the keli. So do we say yesh Yad l'Kiddushin or not? Why is the Gemara asking? See, in Adorim, we know there's a concept of Loshen, between Sfosayim, Halacha, Loshen, B'nei Adam. If there's no, this is a raya to the Chofetz Chaim. If there is no din of Loshen at all, fundamentally, how can the Gemara start discussing a shaila whether you're dying by Kiddushin or not and comparing it to Adorim? So it seems that they are the same. It's a very strong raya to the Bir Halacha. Let's go now to Rav Hutner. Now, usually whenever we talk about Rav Hutner, Pachad Yitzchok, he's usually quoted as a Baal Machshava, right? Beautiful, deep Machshava. People tend to forget sometimes he was a Rosh Hashiva. He wrote a very important sefer on Nozir, Toras HaNozir. He was a Talmid Chacham, he was a classic literature Rosh Hashiva. He also happened to specialize very much, and that's kind of, to some extent, what he's known for. But don't forget, he was a proper Rosh Hashiva. And here, in the Sefer HaZikaron, in the Sefer, this is, the sheet I gave you today, is from one of his tshuvas, one of his michtavim, on, it's in the Sefer HaZikaron, turn to page, it's on the Reish Ches, Ois Gimel. Yeah. B'simin hanal, Oimid Kvoite Rosa, he says, this is Rav Hutner writing. Oimid Kvoite Rosa la Kushya Barambam. The Rambam Paskin, so this, I forget who he was writing it to, doesn't matter. The Rambam Paskins, on the one hand, the Indian Kriyash Man Emeris B'choloshe. On there, the Rambam Paskins, the Ba'inon, Davka Sheyovin Oisaloshen. There, the Rambam stipulates in Hilchos Kriyash Ma, the Rambam stipulates you have to understand what you're saying. Ve'ilu ba'amiras ha'koyin l'saita. Yet, when the koyin speaks to the saita, v'chein b'vidui meiser, detarvayu ne'morim b'choloshin, they are also said b'choloshin, loy hisna ha'rambam klal d'bina navona. The Rambam does not stipulate they need to understand what is being said. By hi, what's the chiluk? Great question. They're both dinim of things which are said can be said b'choloshin. In Hilchos Kriyash Ma, the Rambam adds a tonight. You must understand. You must understand. But when it comes to Saita, Pasha Saita and Vidui Meiser, which are also included in the same list of things which are said in Choloshin, the Rambam omits this requirement that they have to understand. Says Rav Hutner, he comes up with a beautiful chiddush. V'yitochen loima b'zeh behektem hasvara mechudeshes b'hachilches edube'inon havana. He acknowledges he's going to come up with a chiddush, a beautiful svara. Do you uyin hated from Mishnah Berurah Simon Samach Beis? Sheposak sham dechol advarim anemorim b'choloshin hainu davkim anshe Eis Medina medabrim kach. Yes, what we just saw. Mishnah Berurah says that only a loshin is things which are said b'choloshin. It's only if the people in that place. It's not enough for the people who are doing this need to understand, but the people in that place need to understand. Avalim anshe Eis Medina inu medabrim b'zeh loshin v'rak hu v'oidei ze yichidim yoidim Eis loshin ze lo nechshav loshin klal lemedina zu she'eni makeres. Behavior raya. I'm running through this because we just did this. Yes, behavior raya. Lezen hodamim b'kiddushin emachari fosim yudum b'kudeshes. Shekein b'yehuda k'larus charufa. Aval b'sham k'emes enu b'kudeshes. Aval gav d'shneim kimnu l'shem kiddushin. U'kiddushin meim b'cholok. Loshen mikol mokum le'mahani. Yu'uyim sham heitev b'mishnah berurah. V'nimtza lefi zeh. Dedin loshen noitzar davke alidei ha'hishtamshus ba bein bnei odom shel hamokoim hazeh. Therefore, says Rav Hutner, we see from here a definition of Loshoin. It is created by the usage. It is the usage of people in this place that gives, whatever language it is, a din of Loshoin in this place. Brackets. Ulefi zeh, im kora kriyashma be'esperanto, lo yotza. Now, Esperanto, for those of you that don't know, you all know what Esperanto is? Yes, good, okay, educated people, excellent. So therefore he says, if you would, now there are millions of people around the world that do speak Esperanto, right? They should probably get a life, but okay. Well, if he's Kara Krishma Esperanto, lo yotza, afu pishesh l'sofazu, tsuras loshoin b'chol proteha. I knew a professor of Esperanto. People have written books in it, and you know, Der HaPlaga all over again. Let's all speak Sofa Achasudor Machodim. Never mind. Leave the Hashkafa aside. But he says, there is no place where it is utilized as a lingua franca. It isn't used as...
Was supposed to, but no.
It was supposed to. Fail. Yeah. So, ein shumakim yodom yuchad l'chol b'nei adam mishtamshim zeh. Ein shoma loshin le'inyan dina. The hashta... Af anon neimer, the Hilchos said in the Gemara b'choloshin b'inam davka, but inam davka have a nosis shelo oimer. Why do we require the understanding of the person that is speaking this language? Hainu mishum dim ein b'yodei l'shtamish b'loshin zu. Because if you're not able to use it there, shuv le'inyan zu ein hu mitztaref lo insei anshe oisei amokim b'shtamshu zu. If I don't understand that language, then I cannot connect to the other people here. What makes it a language? It makes it a language by the fact that people are using it. If I am unable to use it, I can't connect to the local population. And therefore, for me, it isn't a language. Like when I first came here, German I was out of the loop. Right? It's getting a bit better. Or worse, depending on where you look at it. But that's the point. It's a means of connecting to the people there. Fine. Very beautiful svara, the concept of lashon. And now the work begins. He says we really need to reflect on this halach of the Mishnah Berurah. Now here he asks a gorgeous question. Gewaldig. He said, "Bamiras hakoyin lesoita ubevidui maisa dinom shel shnei elahim bebeis hamikdash davka." These are halachas that could only be done in the precincts of the Beis Hamikdash. Ha'im, and there the Mishnah says, these are things which are nemorim b'chol loshoin. Ha'im gam b'zeh neima de'in ze'ela davka be'im haloshin hazu hi hasofa hamadu beres be'Beis Hamikdash oib Yerushalayim. Are we going to say that this is only going to work if that is a language that is spoken in Yerushalayim, in the Beis Hamikdash? B'vadai sherochik mo'id lo'im it would be very strange on the one hand to have a Mishnah which says a list of things which are nemorim b'chol loshoin, and included in that list is Pasha Soita, but Pasha Soita and Vidui Maisa, which by definition halachically can only be done within the precincts of the Beis Hamikdash. So how can you say b'chol loshoin? So what's going on? Ubal korchoch de daininon bezel hepach. He said from here, he says I could bring you a raya opposite of the Mishnah Berurah. The Adarabba, Davka Mishum de Mekayim Shel Amiras Elu beBeis Hamikdash. Umikol Mokim Nisrabba Behem Koloshoin. From the fact that we know, bring a raya the other way round. From the fact that the Mishnah calls these things which are said b'chol loshoin, and we know that in the Beis Hamikdash one would assume they did not speak b'chol loshoin. They spoke Lashon HaKodesh. Maybe for it, I don't know. To use that as the exemplar of things which are b'chol lashon, you see Shalei Kamishna Brura. You see that you can speak French and German. You can say Pasha Sota in German, even though nobody speaks German there. Now you may need that people have to understand it, Beseda. But it doesn't have to be a Sofa Hamadu Beres in that place. Yes.
I want to add something.
Huh?
I wanted to add something. You know that the second temple, the lingua franca in Israel wasn't actually Hebrew. It was Aramaic at the time.
Okay.
So it wasn't just Hebrew. Yeah, also Aramaic inside.
Beseda, but we're saying B'chol Lashon. We're saying B'chol. Mishnah says, good point. Fine.
So maybe that's B'chol Lashon is like maybe Hebrew and Aramaic at the time. And then you can
B'chol Lashon. Excuse me. The Mishnah is passing a halacha B'chol Lashon. This is law. This is not. It's B'chol Lashon. Yeah. I take your point historically. The other rabbi, he says, Shamin the din loshin ba'achmil se ein atoli b'makom mishtamshus, and atoli b'efshar se mishtamshus. The im yeshlam b'nei adam ba'olam she'efshar mishtamsh b'sof hazu, shuv yeshlo din loshin gam b'beis hamikdash. If there are people in the world that there is a collective, there are people in the world that use this language, then it has a din of lashon even in the Beis Hamikdash. And then he says in the brackets, yesh laponim amukos ma'oid el shalei nitnu lisparish b'ksav hashkafa. Fine. V'hashta afanon namenei mabiyishuv divrei Rambam. Now we can answer the question on the Rambam. Shaloi hisna b'miras hakoinu b'vidu ma'aser shedin b'chol lashon nema rak lemevin. He doesn't say when it comes to Amiras, the Kohen and the Vidoy Maisa, that this din is in B'chol Lashon is said only for those who understand. Because in these, clearly, you don't require the place that it is being used. You see, Bal Korchoch, given that it's in the Beis HaMikdash, or it suffices that this is a language that people could understand, therefore, Shurla Ichbas Anin Hu Eina Mevin. He says, therefore, you see, Adarabba. So if the Sota does not understand, it doesn't matter. Because Ikar Achisaron Be'ena Mevin is why, Mipnei Shani they heder havonah botlets tarfuse bachmil seman she'amokim. The whole, he laid down the svara in the previous column that what? The purpose of understanding is to validate your connection to the local population. But if I don't need a connection to the local population, then you don't need to understand. That's why the Rambam doesn't stipulate in Vidui Meiser and in Sota that you need to understand, because you don't. We made a nimtza but the amiras Kiddushin dinon b'mikdash davka ein heder avona. Now, what about Krishma? Interesting. Ubeguf ha'psak shel ha'mishnah brura ein mashu ksavti b'zeh Toras HaNazir Perek Aleph. So I took the liberty of printing out he wrote a sefer Toras HaNazir, and here he comes up with one chiddush, which I want to quickly share with you, which he says as follows, quite a genius chiddush. He says, Hariat Charufosi, he says, Shekain be Yehuda, they called Arusa Charufa, his understanding is, it is a kinoi. There are certain things in you say slang, right? So if I was to go into England and say, somebody says something and I would say, I understand Central's train station. Right? If I was to go to London, somebody's saying something and I would say, I understand Central train station. They would look at me, you're all smiling, because you know, ich verstehe Bahnhof. Yeah? Nur Bahnhof. Okay, sorry, I didn't get it right. Okay, so in Germany, it has some sort of, it's a slang. It's a kinoi. And it only has resonance. It's not a Lashon Kiddushin. Zokter, beautiful. He says, Hariat Charufosi it's not but moving Shalarusa Eina Ela Lashon Ilgim, Domile Kinuyim. On that, of course, it has to be in the Mokoim. Because outside of that, not because people don't understand or they can't speak the language, but because the Kinui only has any sense there. Once it's outside, it's like people stand and say, I didn't understand Kiddushin, I understood Bahnhof. That's exactly the point. It's a clever answer. Now he says an interesting story. So, really, how's he leaving it? He's leaving it that he does not understand the psak of the Mishnah Berurah. Because of the question that he asked, other Rabbi should see from there that it's the other way around. You see from there that you don't require that something needs to be understood in the place where it's being said. You see that clearly. That was his kasha on the Mishnah Berurah. So listen to what he did. He says, "Udechirna milsa." I remember. Just before I printed this sefer, I had an opportunity to travel from Vilna to Radin. And I said goodbye to the Chaim Grudzinski. Omali. So I asked him this question. I said, I don't understand the Mishnah Berurah. Omali, that shekshe'ehi beradin eshtadel hashmias tanosei al hapsak shel Mishnah Berurah ba'oznov shel Chofetz Chaim zatzal. He told me, so when you're going to Radin, go and ask the Chofetz Chaim. Kemuvan shall sisi b'dvarov. He went to Radin and he asked the Chofetz Chaim his kasha. Omali said the Chofetz Chaim b'hai lishna. B'shas me hoben geschrieben, hoben me gut durchgetan. When we went, he said, when I went through, in other words, he didn't give him it seems the Chofetz Chaim was probably very old then. He said he didn't give him a specific answer, but he said to him that I remember that when we went through the sugya, I looked through the sugya very carefully. So that's not an answer, but he's basically saying, I may not recall all of the details of how I arrived at that, but I stand my psak. Roshamti zel zikaron. And elsewhere he writes, he went back to Reb Chaim Ozer, and Reb Chaim Ozer said, Kvahoira zokein. Chofetz Chaim Atching Paskin, that's it. Kvahoira zokein. And that's where we leave this. Okay.
Rav, so
that's the end of that little mini sugya, and we'll move on. Yes.
So when we say in the case of Yehuda, it was the case that you would say something which was, so to speak, a colloquial expression which would only be understood by the bystanders of that area. That means that we assume that in the realm of Kiddushin it has to be understood by the surrounding.
No, because it's a kinoi. That's where Rav Hutner's chiddush. That's how Rav Hutner understands. He says that's different. He says it. Well, slow down. Let's go back to our Shulchan Aruch. Remember how many different categories of lashon are there in Kiddushin? We mentioned yesterday. How many different categories are there?
We have those expressions which are definitely.
Thank you.
Right?
Lashonos which are vadai Kiddushin, and those are set out in Seif Aleph and Seif Beis.
Right. And then after that we have the Lashonos which could be like in the Libo, which are not really.
What's the word I'm looking for? I just want one word.
I know
Sophic.
Right,
Sophic. That's it.
Right,
there are Lashonos which are Sophic
but they're
Kiddushin.
called something with Libo.
Not Dvarim Shebelev. No. Well, I suppose I understand what you're saying. Okay, you're saying in the Lamdas as follows. The shaila is, why do we need? Is there a din lashon altogether in Kiddushin? So that depends on. So the Chofetz Chaim clearly understood there's a din lashon. Many achronim hold there's no din lashon. You just need to move away. Rabbi Elyashiv, for example, says there's no din lashon. You just need to be able to move away from the defect of dvarim shebalev, and therefore asukim ba'isayinyan is good enough. Not because the dibur is a dibur of Kiddushin necessarily, but because I have demonstrated clearly from the context that it's not dvarim shebalev. And then there are some lashonos which are in themselves, it's unclear whether they are lashonos of Kiddushin. They can also sometimes be used, as lashonos of malacha, not necessarily Kiddushin. And that's what we're going to learn. That's the second one. And the third one are lashonos which are definitely no good. And that, go on.
I wanted to ask the contrast between speaking during Kiddushin, during the process,
yes,
and Dido Maisa and the Sota.
Yes.
It seems that we wouldn't make that rule if there was an expression for Yehuda in those areas, theoretically, wouldn't make that really necessary, because it seems like there is only like a din dibo to speak something out, which is not necessarily needs to be understood in the realm of Sota and
correct.
Maisa. So that would be, I would see that as the difference, like how to differentiate those processes regarding lashon. That there's only a din dibor to speak it out like halakhically in those other areas, but the Kiddushin must be
that's a machlokes whether there is bechlal a din dibor in Kiddushin. Is there a din dibor?
Or just
there are some
Nashon.
Achrayim who learn there's no din dibur at all.
Or there's just a something
Which is
understood.
then it becomes a problem. It'll hinge on how you understand Asukim Ba'isa Inyan. Is Asukim Ba'isa Inyan because really there's no requirement for Dibur anyway, and all I need is to know what's going on? Or is it that the Dibur of the Asukim Ba'isa Inyan is the Dibur, is the Amira?
Okay? Would say
Correct. Let's try and make some progress now on the other Lashonos. Okay? So, Seif Base. Seif Base is, let's run through Seif Base. Im Obala Hariat Ishti Hariat Zukukosi Hariat Knuyoli Hariat Arusosi Hariat Shali Hariat Birshusi Hariat Lukuchosi Merkudeshes. These are Lashonos that are exclusively used for Kiddushin, and therefore they work. Hagar Im Hevino Dvarov Oi Shedibru Tchila Meiske Kiddushin. That is only now because they are not. Then they differ from the ones in Seif Aleph. Hare at resesli, hare at li leisha, right? Therefore, they have to be either, says the Ramah, either she has to understand clearly what's going on, or they were talking about Iske Kiddushin. Fine. By the way, Aval Ha'ish Eino Ne'eman Loimar Shalei Kivin Hashem Kiddushin. He who says it does not have Ne'emonus to say, oh, I didn't intend it to be Kiddushin. Only she has Ne'emonus to say, I didn't understand it as such, but he who is saying it doesn't have that Ne'emonus. Seif Gimel. Omalo Hariat. Now here we go into the realm of those Lashonos which are Sophic. And this is a Gemara, basically. It's a Gemara. The Gemara asks Lashain. Omalo Hariat Miyuedesli, Miyuchedesli, Ezrosi, Negdosi, Talosi, Skurosi, Tachtai, Atsurosi, Tfusasi, Harzum, Kudeshes, Misophic. So these are Kiddushin, Sophic Kiddushin. Hagar says the Ramah. V'hu adinamama Hariat Charufasi, same thing. Avol Omalo Hariat Nesuasi, Yeshemrim Shein Klum. However, says the Shulchan Aruch, these Lashonos which are Sophic, it is only a Sophic if but using these Lashonos which are a Sophic, even though the Gemara says these Lashonos are Sophic Kiddushin, but it doesn't even rise to the level of being a Sophic if they were not Asukim Ba'isa Inyan. You need the two things to go together. That's how the Mechaber paskins. Hagar. You know what? Let's just see, just a second. This is slight. Misha Amal Isha Shanezela Mishvel Ahava V'Chiba Choshesh El Kiddushin. Okay, because Shema maybe he gave it to that there should be Ahava V'Chiba Beinayim, and it's as if he said Miyuedesli and Miyuchedesli. Fine. Yesh Aimrim. The Afal Gav de Lashonos Elu Loi Mahanim Loi Diba Beiske Kiddushin. Mikol Mokoim. The Ramah now is going to be more machmir. He's quoting an apparent view from a Tshuvas Rashba, which itself is somewhat debatable whether this is what the Tshuvas Rashba meant, whether it's even a proper Tshuvas Rashba. Some Achronim say it's not even an authentic one. So far, where are we up to? The Shulchan Aruch paskins here in Sif Gimel that if you use these Lashonos which are Sophic Kiddushin, it's only a Sophic if there was they were talking Asukim Ba'isa Inyan. The Ramah comes along in the name of the Rashba and says, Yesh Omrim, that when do you require the Asukim Ba'isa Inyan in order to make it a Sophic? That's only if she does not say, oh, I understood it to be Kiddushin. But if she turns around and says, yeah, I understood it was Kiddushin, even though they were not previously talking about Kiddushin. Guy goes up to her in the street in front of two Adam and says, Hare at Miyuedesli. Says the Ramah, B'Shem the Tshuvas Rashba, Yeshomrim, that Sophic Kiddushin. We stop and we say, what just happened? What, this guy just gave you a ring. That's very nice of him. What did he do? She said, duh, he just married me. If that's what she understood, even though they were not speaking before Miske Kiddushin, the Rashba is machmir to say that is Sophic Kiddushin. Va'afilu nosen la b'shtika v'loi diber klum. Even if he didn't say a word, but both of they weren't Asukim Ba'isa Inyan. A very important remark. They were not Asukim Ba'isa Inyan. And a guy just goes up to a girl and gives her a ring, and we then quiz them straight afterwards and say, what's happening? And he said, I'm Mekadosh her. And she said, yeah, he was Mekadosh me. Then it is have a Kiddushin. Mordechai Perkish Mekadosh Shuvas Marit. Ubemokoim. Right, that's all we need for that. Okay, so what we're going to pass in halacha l'maisa. Let me dig down. I'll save you the work of working out. So what are we going to pass in halacha l'maisa? Second, we can just find the right place with these different showing us of Amira. It's not there. It's Yadayim. Just a second.
Isn't halacha much more dependent on the Eidim?
I can't really hear you clearly, Daniel. Sorry.
Isn't halacha l'maisa also much more dependent on the Eidim?
Good point. Good point. We're going to come to that. Yes. Yeah. Good point. We need the Eidim as well.
Very much.
Just a second. Where's it gone? I can't find it. I've especially noted it before. Here we go. Oh, Nosan Bishtika. Nosan Bishtika. So the Ramah says if they both said that they had kavanah for kiddushin, it would be mekudeshes. The Hilchos Mechokim and the Beis Shmuel argue on the Ramah. Then he says that the Ramah didn't get it right, so to speak. He says the Maram is speaking, which is the Makor is speaking where they were speaking. They were speaking beforehand by Iskei Kiddushin, but the Eidim didn't see the bit that they were speaking beforehand at Iskei Kiddushin. And the Beis Shmuel says that the Tshuvas Rashba and the Ritva argue on the Maram, and therefore they are not. So the Ramah is machmir to say that it's Kiddushin, and the Hilchos Mechokim and the Beis Shmuel argue on the Ramah. That is the halacha l'maisa here. Your point about the Eidim is a good one, Daniel. I'd like to get back to you on that. I don't have a good answer for that off the top of my head. I need to think about that. Do we have any time left? Yes. Let's start Sif Daled. This is important. And this is the sugya of Yodayim. Yodayim, which is an incomplete dibur, right? Yodayim is an incomplete dibur. Gemara in the Dorim talks about it. There's Yodayim. There's two types of Yodayim. There's Yodayim Mechichos and Yodayim She'en Mechichos. The classic case is Omar lo hariat mekudeshes v'loi Omar li. He gives a ring, but he misses out li. Eina mekudeshes. Eina mekudeshes. So the Shulchan Aruch Paskins Eina mekudeshes says the Ramah v'chein ikka. Eina v'chein ikka. Because you do not have a clear lashon that he meant for himself. He said Arat Mekudeshes. That's how it says the Ramah. Let's go weiter. Avol. Sorry?
You can say Eina Mekudeshes lo.
She's not Mekudeshes, full stop.
Okay.
We have no way of knowing who she might be Mekudesh too.
Okay.
No, it didn't work. It didn't work.
Okay.
Because it wasn't clear. It wasn't a Lashon Kiddushin if it wasn't clear. But then the Ramah continues, Avol Yesh Machmirim v'Omrim have a Kiddushin. Yesh Machmirim say that it is Kiddushin. So even though the Ramah already said v'chein ikka, so he is clearly, fundamentally paskening, it's not Kiddushin. That's his main opinion. But he says, be aware there are yesh machmirim, and this is going to create a problem for the achronim. So now, what do I do with this? How are we going to pasken halacha l'maisa? We'll come to that very shortly. Next point says the Shulchan Aruch hayamadaber imal iskei kiddushin harizum kadeshes. However, if he was beforehand, if they were medaber on iskei kiddushin, then he says harizum kadeshes. Then of course it's going to be good, because that's Yodayim Mechichos. And the truth is you don't even need. Remember, you can even do B'shtika. Okay, let's stop there. Fine. How are we going to pasken halacha l'maisa? So, let me get the summary here, taking into account the achronim. There's a Chasam Sofer. Chasam Sofer here says the das kol harishonim, that if you don't say li, it's not mekudeshes at all, and we're not choshesh for the yesh machmirim. Chasam Sofer just dismisses it. He goes along with the Ramah says v'chein ikka. There are machmirim. Who are the machmirim? The machmirim are the Radvaz, the Maram Padva, and the Bach, and some other achronim as well. And they say because of a chumrah of Dava Sheba Erva, taking into account the Rashba, Yesh Omrim, maybe we should be matzrich get. However, many achronim the Marivail, the Chasam Sofer, the Bnei Shmuel, Yam Shlosh Shleim, and many other Achronim, Paskan Halacha L'Maisa, that we're not choshesh at all. And remember, this could bring to a case of Mamzerus, etc. And therefore, they Paskan that there's definitely one can rely on the main opinion, which is that it doesn't work. Okay, so Eino Kiddushin, and that is that probably for today. Maybe I should just quickly throw in 2 more minutes. I'll just throw in the Asukim Ba'isa Inyan. Asukim Ba'isa Inyan, which we saw really in Seif Aleph. There are potentially 4 different types of Asukim Ba'isa Inyan. Okay? The first one is that they're Asukim Ba'isa Inyan, and he gives her money, b'shtika. There, everybody agrees, Mekudeshes. Okay? Everybody agrees it's Mekudeshes. It's not Dvarim Shebalev, either because the Asukim Ba'isa Inyan counts as the Amira, or because it's obvious from the context. And therefore, that definitely works. What would be if they were Asukim Ba'isa Inyan, and he was Mekadesh Alidei Yodayim? That's what we just saw. Then Mekudeshes. Right? Use Yodayim, Hariyat Mekudeshes, even without a li. That's called it's Yodayim, but they are, if they're Asuka Ba'isa Inyan, the Mechaba Paskins, then it works. That's case number 2. If they were Asukim Ba'isa Inyan, and he uses one of the Lashonos which are a Sophic, then it's Sophic Mekudeshes. Yes? And the 4th case is, they were Asukim Ba'isa Inyan, and he used a Lashon which is totally possible. And interestingly enough, on that, there are actually 3 different opinions. The Torah says, Eina Mekudeshes Klal. Asukim Ba'isa Inyan, and he used one of the Lashonos which we'll see, which are definitely Lashonos Apsulim. The Torah holds Eina Mekudeshes Klal. There's a Yesh Cholkim that Rabbeinu Yerucham says that it definitely is good, fascinatingly. And there's a Yesh Oimrim Rabbeinu Yerucham says Safek Mekudeshes. And those are your 4 scenarios of Asukim Ba'isa Inyan. And tomorrow we can move on to Nosan Huva Amrahi, which is another interesting sugya. Shkaya.